Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I want to do something a little bit different than the usual YouTube post to a question, answer question. You know, I want to do something more of a let your hair down, get into a discussion. So this is the easiest way for me to do it versus trying to make a video 10 minutes trying to explain something. Now, this one isn't rehearsed. I might have bullet points that I want to touch on, but this one's coming just straight up off the cuff. So we're having a discussion. So tonight's discussion is, can being in the reserves strain a marriage enough to call it quits? So like I said, can being in the reserves strain a relationship that can end it? Well, most of your emergency responders have the highest, divorce rate? I believe the military has, 3% of the military gets divorced or something like that? But all in all, it's not like being active duty. But it all depends. Do I think it took a toll on my marriage? Of course it did. I mean, it takes a certain individual to be able to ride that out with you. No fault of anyone's own. But a lot of it revolves around dedication, both parties. But I think in the reserves, it hits a lot harder. And depending on your job, too. And I'll talk about that. It all depends on what we call op tempo or operation tempo. The operation tempo is the amount of time that unit goes on deployment or is always activated or always out on missions. The reserves is sold to you or put out there as, part-time job, be all that you can be. You do one weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year. That's the reserves. But no one tells you that that's the minimum that you can do. The minimum. And I say that because you need that to have what we call a good year. On the reserve side, having a good year is a good retirement year. You have to attend so many battle assemblies, or I'll say drill weekends, and do your 2 weeks every year to have enough points to retire at 20. A lot of people don't realize that a reservist retirement isn't the same as an active duty retirement. Yeah, everybody thinks that since you're in the military, you get that big old pension. But there's a lot that weighs in that. And that's where the whole op tempo part comes in. So, like I said, as a reservist, you're supposed to do that 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year. You're married, married and with children. I'm gonna lean it more towards that. Married with children. It's easy to plan around to get that 1 weekend a month. Depending on the circumstances change. In the reserves, your unit could be right around the corner, or it can be across the country. It could be either or, depending on what unit you're a part of and where you got promoted and so forth. Now, the National Guard, which is the state's militia, you'll be somewhere within the state. Now, depending on how big your state is, dictates how far away you'll go. Like, I talk to people from Texas. Texas is huge. So you could be in Austin and your unit could be in, I don't know, I'm not that familiar with Texas, but on the other side of Texas. Like, Pennsylvania's huge. You could live in Philly and your unit is over by the Ohio side of Pennsylvania. So that's quite a few hours away. Or you can be like me and my unit is a half an hour away. That changes a whole lot, or affects everything also. Because if you're right around the corner, you can go home every night and still play family as you're playing soldier. You 9 to 5 it, go home, eat dinner with the family, put the kids to bed, get some of that warm loving time by the spouse, wake up early in the morning and do it all again for that weekend. Now, the 2 weeks can be anywhere. The 2 weeks can be at your home station, which would be that place that you go to during drill. It could be in Germany. It could be in another state. All depends on where they're going to have it at. But that's 2 weeks away from the house. That doesn't really make a big difference or big deal. I mean, it can with some families. You can feel a little strain there. Because let's say, for example, if the wife is the one who's home with the kids, I have a perfect scenario. During the mobilization, he actually fell off the mobilization. His wife actually said she divorced him if he actually mobilized. And you can't fault him on that, because if I had to choose my family or the military, my family's always going to win. But he has over 20 years in also. But his wife is a district attorney or prosecutor, something big like that. And they have, I think, like 3 kids. And he works for, let's say, for the Marines as a civilian contractor. And so if she's on cases, she's bogged down. So he was going to go away for a year, and her handling the household by herself was going to be near impossible. And that put a big strain on their marriage for her to threaten divorce, which is crazy, but it's not. And I'll tell you why. Myself, I got about 17 years in. Like I said, your typical reservist does about 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year. Well, for the past 17 years, let's see. Before I was married, I mobilized, went overseas, came back. So that was over a year. Came back, taught on base for a year, mobilized. I was engaged and got married. And then go back to my civilian job. That was for a year. And then I was in a training unit. So then I was on orders for about 6 months, 7 months. Came back off orders. Let's see. Then I was on orders for about another 7 months. This is not back to back, but throughout the years. That time, I traveled all around. But I was home for a week, gone for 2 weeks. Home for a week, gone for 2 weeks. Then let's even push a little bit forward. Daughter's born December 31st. Shout out to New Year's Eve babies. December 31st. That February, I was gone in California for a month. Brand new baby in the house. Not home. It's all for my wife to take care of. Home for a few months. Go to Warrant Officer Candidate course. That was 5 weeks. That was July. But before then, no, that was July. Nothing substantial. Give it a year and a half. Yeah, give it a year and a half. Then I'm gone for 8 months. Geo Bachelor down at Fort Gordon. So at that time, my daughter was 2 years old, and I had a stepson too, who was into sports. You see where the strain is going? And then on top of that, there's still more time. That's giving you an idea of my operation tempo. And think about that. That operation tempo itself, that's a huge strain on a marriage, on a relationship, because you're always gone. And when you have young children involved, it's a strain on both parties, but it's more of a strain on the one who's dealing with the kids, because that one has no time to even breathe. With you can be in one or two environments. One could be a hostile environment, or one could be stateside to where it's Gucci. But nevertheless, as you can see, like, that can build some kind of resentment. You're never around. But then you have, talking about kind of reserve strain of marriage, when you're gone, you have the unfaithfulness. And that goes both ways. So you're gone all the time, let's say with or without kids, but without kids it makes it easier to stray. You're gone all the time, and either A, the soldier who is around certain individuals all the time, that becomes their secondary family, and you're around somebody so much it makes it easier for you to have feelings. You have that side that strays. Or you have the other side at home who's lonely all the time and gets attention from someone on the outside, and all they see is them. It could be in the workplace, it could be the neighbor, and they could stray. And you can see the strain to put on the marriage then also. That's from both sides. It's the faithfulness. And that happens a lot. I've seen some stuff on the military side. I've seen, and I'm not trying to bash, anybody, but I've seen one girl in one of my schools. Her whole thing was to smut it out while she was away on military. And usually the guys that are dirty like that end up doing it, but that was her thing, is to smut it out when she was on military and go back home to her husband and a couple kids, which is kind of gross. But that was her thing, and it's one of those things, like, they don't know, it doesn't exist in their world, but we're not even going to go there. But yeah, so as you see, like, being in the reserves can cause a strain in your relationship. When it leads to the divorce side or the breakup, it's because that other party, if you're gone so much, the other party's so used to you being gone, that, it's like, what's the point of being with them? I don't feel the same as I did before, because they're never around. You know what I mean? So it's like, if I leave them, and I've seen divorces happen like that you're gone so much that the other spouse is like, what's it matter? If I leave you, I'm used to raising the kids on my own anyway, or being on my own. So let me just cut this off right here. And I'm not speaking negatively on the reserves. We do have the upsides. But this is to talk about that marriage, relationships, just being in the reserves. The regular Army has its own issues. They can fall side by side with this, which it really does. But this here is, you have the person who's home. Active duty the same way too. A lot of us don't realize that this happens, but it happens a lot. Same thing with first responders. Law enforcement pairs right up with the military on that. Because you're always away and going at odd hours, and it does cause that strain on a relationship. I've seen people hold true to their relationships, it takes a strong household to do that. By both sides, you know, try to reach out to the other side. You know, show them that you're there, you know, regardless, even when you're not there. You know, the basic things that to make your spouse want you and want to stay with you, types of things really help out a lot. And don't get consumed in being gone unless you can't communicate from where you're at. You know, so there is a will. If there is a will, there's a way. There is a will, there's a way. It happens all the time. So everyone in the military or in the reserves doesn't get divorced, but it can be a contributor to it. A lot of times it is. You know, but yeah, you know, it's nice talk. You know, just wanted to really have a discussion about that. You know, doing that in a regular YouTube video was just more or less, you know, answer questions. But this is just a discussion. You know, I'm just having a talk. Just having a talk. I mean, marriage is very sacred. And if you respect the bond and the tenets of marriage, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, every marriage isn't perfect. If you've been married before, you know this. And if you've been in a long time relationship, you know this. You just have to work through the hard times. If you're not willing to work through the hard times, it's going to fall apart. And those are some of the hard times. Those are some of the hard times. And those are the obstacles that you have to, you know, overcome. You know, that the feeling of loneliness, you know, that loneliness part, that's a big one. That's a big one. You know, don't get so lonely to where you want to have somebody fill that void. And the other person isn't, I want to say, intentionally staying away, but doing their duty. But that loneliness is mean. That loneliness is mean. That's what causes a lot of these things to fall by the wayside. That's on both sides. I've seen it happen on both sides. I've seen it happen with both sides at the same time. You know, you have the soldier who's out there, you know, supposed to be on his mission and he's messing around. But then you have the wife back at home, you know, messing around too. And what's crazy is that they both have their stuff going on. They come back together and it's like nothing ever happened. I got some stories I can tell you guys, but I'm not going to tell you guys because it just makes service members look bad, and all service members aren't bad, just like all cops aren't bad. You know, so I'm not going to stigmatize, you know, and try to muddy those waters. Absolutely not. But, I mean, being in that environment, I've seen it. I've seen it to the fullest. But, you know, if you decide to go in the reserves and you're married, or if you're in the reserves and you're married, make sure you have a stable household. Make sure that you really communicate to the other partner that you're there for them. You know, that's all I got to really say about that. You know, that's a personal one. It's a personal one. Like I said, did I think that aided in mine? Probably, but it happened later on down the line. But I mean, I give shout outs to my ex-wife. You know, she really held the fort down. I mean, I'm gonna give credit where it's due. You know, that's real talk. I mean, I'm not a barbarian. But I'm gonna wrap this thing up for tonight. You know, but I just want you guys to think about that. I'm gonna leave that for you guys to think about. Roll that around in your head. And when you see another reservist, or if you're a civilian out there and you know someone's in the reserves, just think about how tight the relationship has to be to keep going. I mean, because when I mean it affects the whole family, that one gentleman I told you about that his wife made that threat, now that I think about it, I know another guy. He got out. He was a staff sergeant. But I remember asking him after our deployment, why are you getting out? And he said, if I don't get out, my wife's going to leave me. And he had a young one too. And he was a school teacher. So you start getting those ultimatums like, what's more important? And matter of fact, I think he had at least 10 years in, so he was halfway there. And that's a big decision you have to make, but not a big decision because your family always comes first. But sleep on that one. Till next time, everybody have a good night. Thank a service member. I want to thank all my veterans out there and my brothers and sisters in arms. And everybody have a good night. Rob the Black, I'm out.